be awesome. Yeah, it'd be great to be outside. 80 degrees. It's gorgeous. Oh, yeah, that's not a bad idea, actually. Because now they have the pavilion thing over top, right? Are we good? All right, I'm getting the thumbs up. We're getting the green light for TV here, for the TV audience. Okay, 7 o'clock. All right, is everybody ready? Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Lower Pax Township Authority meeting for Tuesday, April 27th, 2021. First item of business will be the Pledge of Allegiance by Mr. Zumas.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Zumas, thank you very much. All right, then we got changing of the guard of the police. That was a short shift for the first officer. Second officer, he cannot wait for the municipal authority meeting. So, all right. Approval of the minutes from January 26th and the 23rd of March 2021. Everybody have a chance to review the minutes? Any questions on the minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of January 26, 2021 reorganizational meeting, March 23rd, 2021 business meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Lindsay. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Navarro. Any further discussion? We do that by voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. All right, next item of business is public comment. There is no public for comment, so we will move right on to board member comments. Any board member comments? All right, moving right along. We're going to go into the Stormwater Fund first. First item of business is Resolution 2107, authorizing condemnation of a storm sewer easement for the BC2 ABC and 5B project.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Resolution 2107, again, the board has seen these resolutions many times. This is one storm sewer line in BC5 that Jason Hines and HRG added to the lining contract, and therefore we just sent out the easement documents. We got 4 of the 5 back for the extra lining. This one, HRG is still reaching out to these folks one last time, but as a precaution, since we're having a meeting tonight, board has in front of them the resolution to authorize the township manager and the solicitor, if necessary, to proceed with condemnation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Seems pretty straightforward. Any questions for board members? Is there a motion on the floor to approve Resolution 2107?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve Resolution 2107, authorizing condemnation of a storm sewer easement for the BC2, ABC, and 5B
Your mic.
project.
Motion on the floor by Mr. Zumas. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Navarro. Any further discussion? I think we do this by voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. All right, Mr. Zumas, I think you're under distress, aren't you?
Terrible stress.
Well, your flag's upside down. Looks like you're signaling distress.
That would be distress.
Yeah, you want to get that flag struck. Yeah, let's get that squared away. All right, now we're not under distress up here.
I feel
All
much
right,
better
there we
now.
go. Mr. Zumas he's back. He's
Much
back,
better.
ready to rock.
Phew.
All right, township reports for the stormwater fund.
Yes.
Mr. Weaver.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll be brief. HRG provided a report at the March meeting. Not much has changed. I just have 2 or 3 really quick updates. We did get the DEP permit, but we still haven't gotten the federal permit for the Stonebridge project. But Mr. Hines said we're on track to bid it this summer. Also, at the last meeting, we discussed the surveys. Tim met with HRG. I sat in for a little while, but in the June meeting, we'll have a full report with a list of all 33 surveys and what HRG's recommendations and Tim's are for each of those surveys, and then we're going to respond to all the residents that responded. And then lastly, the PennDOT project, we got an email from PennDOT today. It's going okay, but there is a dispute with the contract with RES. PennDOT met with their attorneys. They emailed us today some recommendations for the joint PRP group. So I have a meeting scheduled for Thursday with Aaron Latavic from HRG. Initially, it looks like we're going to accept the recommendations from PennDOT and their legal staff since it is their contract. We have trust in them. But it's just, there's different protocols and modeling. But at the June meeting, I'll provide HRG and myself will provide you an update on that contract and give you a little bit more information about that dispute. That concludes my report. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Weaver? All right, solid job there, Mr. Weaver. Let's move on to the sanitary sewer fund. First item of business is the presentation of the PADP consent decree draft, BC and PC cap revisions.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
Mr. Weaver,
Thank you.
just like we talked about.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
So we have a Paxton Creek and Beaver Creek status update, and when we're complete, if the board is pleased, we'd like to recommend a motion for GHD to submit the new cap tables for Paxton and Beaver. But essentially, this presentation is to, since we have a lot of new board members and we haven't done this in years, go over the consent decree requirements, go over each of the basins, what lessons we've learned, and then what's this all costing and what the impacts on rates are. So under the consent decree, goals of the consent decree, this was, next slide then, Dave. So this slide here is out of the consent decree. We were the first municipality in the state of PA to get this. So what this is, and this we're going to be talking about this over the next 25 minutes of this presentation, is we were allowed to get our conveyance system to operate with the needed additional capacity without a threat of overflow. The Chapter 94 regulation says you have to keep it in the pipe. This allows us to surcharge in the manholes in the entire system and then monitor key manholes that GHD specifies for their modeling. So we're really the first municipality in the state to get that, and that was crucial for us. So we're going to talk about that as we go through the presentation tonight. But that is the goal, is to reduce the overload so we don't have a threat of an overflow. And then these are just the dates. So another reason we wanted to provide this evening is we actually are far enough along in Paxton Creek that we're almost done. The overflow deadline is next June, and then the 2027 is the hydraulic overload. And Beaver Creek we negotiate later, so those dates are a little bit farther back, 28 and 33. So we haven't given this report for a long time, so this slide kind of encompasses everything we've done in the last 17 years. So back in 2005, we started and we completed 17 mini basins, 3,756 private sewers, and the estimated peak flows when we started was 27 MGD, and the current flows are 12.2 MGD. And again, that's going to be our theme tonight, how successful Paxton Creek has been with this total sewer replacement. So we have removed 14.8 MGD. The total project cost for these 17 mini basins was $47.5 million, and we had 8 mini basins prior to the total replacement program, and that cost was $6.8 million. So the total project cost to date is $54.3 million. And some of you may recall the cost per gallon analysis that we look at. So when you take what we spent to date and what the I&I removed, that comes out to $3.67 per gallon. That's pretty good. And as part of all that, as part of the consent decree, we are in a connection restriction, but because of the success, we get an extra 10 connections for every mini basin that we complete. So we have received 150 additional connections plus the 93 that we previously had. So we are at 243. So basically we can apply for the 20 more, but we only get about 70 permits a year in Paxton Creek, and that's mostly in Blue Ridge Village right now. So that is really...
I think it's pretty amazing we haven't had an overflow since 2013 there.
Yes.
I mean, really, when you think about it, where we started in that project in 2005, I mean, Paxton Creek was a mess.
Yep.
And Bill, real quick,
Yes.
MGD, I don't know if we pointed out, it's millions of gallons per day.
Million gallons a day,
Okay.
yes.
And basically, we achieved the reduction by eliminating the influx of groundwater, of water into the lines.
Into the pipes, but how we did that is essentially we found that patching pipes is not the right idea. The example is if you patch the roof over there, it's going to leak over there. So we tried to repair the system, and then the flows would go down and then go right back up. So sewer replacement, there's no way for the water to get in the pipe because it's all brand new.
Right, and the reason I bring this up is this right here is really explains 90% of what we're doing.
Yes.
Every month, a huge part of everybody's sewer bill, and I think it's always important just to get back to the basics, just for people who haven't been following from the beginning, and just say, this is what it's all about. And
Right.
when your rates do go up, it's generally because we're paying for this massive project, and how we're doing it is, like you said, raw, replace, and keep water out, and
Yeah, so like your roof, that's always our example at the public meetings. You know, it's leaking over there, then you patch over there. Well, when you replace the whole roof, then you don't have leaks in your house anymore. And that's sort of the same theory in the sewer system.
right, thank you.
Yep. And then this map, the board members are familiar with the township, but it doesn't have a lot of information that you can represent the neighborhoods, but you've seen these before. So the green is what's been replaced and the red is what's remaining. And we're going to go over those areas later. So unfortunately, though, we still have some remaining capacity restrictions. Alton and his staff didn't eat their Snicker bar. That's what I always tell them. So these are the two restriction areas. Manhole 647 to 667, and then manhole 95. And then the next slide shows the map. So to the south, you're familiar with Goose Valley Road. That is 667 is Goose Valley Road. And all these mini basins that we're going to go over next sort of surround that area. And then to the north, that's just above Sheets off of Linglestown Road. Those are the two areas really left in Paxton Creek where we have some work to do.
Mr. Weaver, can I
Yeah.
just ask you a question?
Yeah.
For like 6 or 8 months, Goose Valley was tore up. Was that stormwater or sewer?
Stormwater,
That was
actually,
stormwater,
yes.
okay.
We did some lining there, but that was part of the 2019 stormwater contract.
Okay.
And they are actually having a problem with that right now. I don't know if you heard.
Oh,
but-
again? Oh,
Yeah, the pipe that was put in actually failed, and they have to come out and replace it.
okay.
It was damaged, yes. So the next slide, basically, we do this internally. We do all the metering, provide the data to GHD, and they go through the data and make recommendations. So basically, this is why we're asking for a motion at the end of the meeting to authorize the new cap, because now we looked at these flows. Once the flows go down, you can get better meter data. So now we found that PC3E is actually the highest mini basin at 1,028,000, or 208,000, excuse me. Each of those you can see are at 4,000 to 5,000 gallons per day per EDU. Our target is 1,000. So all these mini basins eventually may need done, but right now, Alton's saying to eliminate these capacity concerns, you have certain options, and so that's the next slide. So here are your options. You could do 1F and one of the following alternatives, 2E and 3D, or 3E. So basically, GHD and staff recommended that we do 1F and 3E because they are the highest mini basins, and that should reduce the overload in those sections. So then the next slide basically that's our current cap. So if you approve the cap this evening, you're going to cross out 2E essentially. And the next slide, you're going to show that we're going to add 1F and 3E. And that will be the two remaining basins in the Paxton Creek program. And then we're going to reevaluate in 2024. Now, you'll notice we show storage facilities there in 2027. It's too early to take out the storage facility, but we intend at some point in the next few years, in 2024, we anticipate that the results will be what they've been and that storage will not be needed. In the next slide, 2 slides, we'll go over that.
Again, that's the storage thing. Again, is good news considering.
Yes.
You know, the number of times we looked at the idea of buying land for storage and to put a storage system there.
Yes, we did in Commerce Park.
Yep.
So this is the slide that just update the board on the new peak flow and the storage requirements. So the current meter data and model results indicate that storage is not required in June 2027. Again, we're going to leave it in there for now. Storage may be needed for future flows from development growth, but potentially may be recovered from developers for capacity costs. So down the road, if we don't need storage for the existing flows, then under the tapping fee laws, if you create capacity for a developer, then you can ask for a tapping fee for that. So the flow study and the update to the modeling, as I just mentioned, will be done in 2024 to confirm. And revising the cap to show delayed storage for future capacity would then be needed after that, if that indeed is what it shows. So why the change in storage needs? So the big issue that I brought up in the beginning, and I said we're going to keep talking about this, is the IMA with Susquehanna. We increased the capacity from 17 to 20 because the city of Harrisburg, now CRW, did a bunch of work downstream. They cleaned out their interceptors, and we found we could get more flow through the Paxton Creek interceptor. So Alton modeled it, made a recommendation to us. We met with Susquehanna. They agreed. So from taking the total capacity from 17 to 20 MGD, that gave us 1.77 MGD more. So 10.57 to 12.34, that's a big deal. And I'm going to show you on the next slide why that is. But the other main issue, too, is we had actual I&I removal rates exceeded our projection. We were projecting 80%. We're getting 85, 95% removal up to 100. So this slide basically shows that our new limit, which is the top line there, 12.34, all of the data points below are wet weather events that we record, and you can see that we're under on all of them. We have two above, 10/31/19 and 3/22/19. So those were not excused events. We were over our overload limit. We had no overflows. However, the top one there, we had 3.7 inches on that event and 8.9 inches for the month. So you're going to have events that are going to push the limits. Now, the CAP plan we just showed you that we're proposing, we're doing 2 additional mini basins, right? So we're hoping that with those 2 additional mini basins that we can get all those points below the 12.34, but that remains to be seen. This is why we do the projects and then come back and show you more data. But right now you can see all those points are below the intermunicipal agreement limit.
And Bill, we talk about overflows a lot.
Yes.
It's when manholes overflow, or are there other, how do we measure it?
Just manhole overflows. It pops out the manhole and goes into the stream. That's a violation of the Clean Water Act in Chapter 94. That's why we got into the consent
I didn't
decree.
know if there's another, yeah, and just so people need to know, like,
Right.
they're gonna hear that word a lot, and
Yes.
we mean it literally, we mean when it
Right.
actually, there's
In
enough.
this case, though, we did not overflow. We haven't had an overflow since 2013, but we went over our capacity limit of 12.34.
So you don't necessarily need a actual overflow to occur.
Well, it's just an alert for the engineer that, okay,
Not the physical, but
we had high flows, so therefore those events could trigger an overflow. That if it gets a little higher than that, then you're going to start popping manholes.
It's a number we can't exceed. It's the
Correct.
certain volume we can't exceed, because that'll happen.
That was the modeling that they showed at 12.34. When you get over that, you're risking overflows.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
So, the 2 remaining slides, we're going to talk a little bit about what happens when the consent decree is over, because believe it or not, we've been doing this for 20 years. 19. We started in 2002 on the consent decree in Paxton Creek. So when we are complete, we have, again, that long-term monitoring plan that we talked about, where you have to measure these manhole surcharge locations to make sure there's not a threat of overflow. So Alton and his staff have selected these 4 manholes, and they have submitted those to DEP, and they have been approved as our future surcharge locations that will be monitored for basically ever. And Alton will have to report that to DEP and what those levels are during wet weather events in our annual Chapter 94 report. And then the next slide just represents where those manhole locations are. And if you recall, these manhole locations are the same ones where we have these capacity kind of questions, and that's why we're doing future mini basins in these areas. The one below is Goose Valley Road. The other one above is just right of Sheets, north of Sheets. Manhole 69, that's down close to the Susquehanna border. And where's the fourth one at, Alton? Oh, yeah, in the middle 90s, right off of Linglestown Road at the golf driving range. Is there any questions on Paxton Creek?
Nope, seems pretty straightforward, my friend.
Okay, moving on to Beaver. So Beaver, this slide really explains where we need to go from here. So basically, the top of the system, you can see in this slide that in BC2, where we're working now, we have overflows on, well, let me start at the beginning. This sheet represents every manhole that can overflow or has overflowed in the past. So in order to eliminate those, we have to do projects, mini basins. So BC2 and 5 will address the overflows in pink. And then the impacted ones in BC7 are the ones in yellow that also are impacted by BC2 because BC2 is above BC7 next to it. The next slide basically is our current CAP plan. And that basically shows that we're doing BC2 and BC7. You've heard us talk about those on many occasions at these monthly meetings. And then BC 7D, 8D, and 8C. All those are under design and construction. So that's our current cap. And you can see at the bottom we show storage in 2028, and we're going to talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
So the revised cap. So the revised cap, the reason we're recommending a revised cap is the green is under construction. The yellow still needs to be done. So we front-loaded all these projects, and we found out that once we started doing stormwater, that adds a lot of additional work to the contract. So you're actually adding months, okay? Because you're going to the neighborhood, you're just not replacing the sewer, you're replacing the stormwater. Secondly, to get all these projects off the ground, you have to get a permit from DEP. Well, because of COVID and other factors that we really haven't heard from yet, what their reasoning is, but there's a delay in getting the environmental permits. So we are scheduled to bid BC7 in September, but we don't have the permit, and we even received administrative completeness that the permit's even ready to be reviewed by DEP. So what DEP is doing is they're shifting workloads to different regions. So our permit right now has been shipped to Wilkesboro, and we haven't gotten a response on what the status is. So we're going to have GHD do that here shortly and get a response. So what we're proposing is pushing back BC7 for completion from 2023 to 2024, and that also includes 8C and 8D. So this cap table is basically, we're not changing anything except the completion dates are pushed back a year. So we want to be safe, because if we wouldn't change the table and we didn't make the 2023, then DEP and SWAT could say, oh, well, you're not in compliance with your caps, so you don't get all your connection permits. That's a condition in the consent decree. We talked to DEP. Tim Wagner is our consent decree coordinator. He has no problem with us submitting these tables, and he does not anticipate any reason why they won't be approved.
Okay.
Bill, what area is BC7?
That is actually everything north and south of Devonshire Heights. That's the Springgate Springgate wineries in the start of the project. Then it meanders north across Devonshire Heights Road, and then it goes east. So it's basically that whole area there. There's 530 properties.
So it's back in Lamplight.
Meadowbrook, Lamplight. Yep.
Okay.
And then the next slide is the same thing as Paxton. We wanted to show you the progress is everything in green has been done, and everything in red still needs to be completed. And Beaver Creek's a little larger, so we had to represent that on two maps. But you can see that in Beaver Creek, if you recall, in Paxton Creek, if you recall, there was a lot more green. In Beaver Creek, we started later, so you can see there's a lot more red.
Okay.
And then just a summary, sort of what I provided in Paxton Creek. So the total replacement program began later in Beaver Creek in 2013. To date, we have 9 mini basins completed compared to the 17 in Paxton Creek. That includes 1,736 private sewers at a total cost of $28,887,000. The flow study and update of the modeling in 2024 will be completed, and then the BC storage evaluation to compare storage to and the interceptor replacements to what we're going to show you later, the impact on rates on these two alternatives. Comparing that to new mini basin sewer replacements in 26, 27, and 28 that would be in place, replace storage. So you're looking at either doing storage or doing future mini basins. So then in 2025, we would anticipate revising the cap. So the next slide. So there's a lot of parallels here, of course. This is the parallel in Beaver Creek. In Paxton Creek and Beaver Creek is, again, the downstream capacity. So what I wanted to show the board is this slide was crucial. Alton, and everybody remembers Jeff Wendell. Jeff was instrumental in proposing this whole program and also meeting with Swatera to get extra capacity in the treatment plant. So when the treatment plant was upgraded to meet the Chesapeake Bay requirements, he met with their staff, convinced them that they could upgrade their pump station and get extra capacity in the plant. They were hesitant over the years, but they finally agreed. So the bold number there, maximum monthly flow, that's 5.36. That used to be the number above that, which is 3.795. So we increased our capacity by a good bit. So a lot of the board members are new. What started this whole consent decree was we went over 3.795 for 2 consecutive months, and Swatera instituted a ban on connections. So we've grown in the last 25 years, but the 5.361 is not a problem. So this just shows you that it's not the downstream capacity that's the issue. There's other issues that we're going to explain next. So this is the final compliance analysis, and our issue is that we have a peak hourly flow limit on the interceptor that goes down to the treatment plant, and that limit is 9.487. So the capacity in the joint use interceptor is restricted. They have all the manholes bolted down, so they're really not going to overflow. But if we go over 9.47, in the IMA, the intermunicipal agreement, we could be fined $1,000 for every day we exceed 9.47. However, it's not being enforced by Swatera. It's not causing overflows. And to this date, we have not received a fine. The localized surcharge without threat of the overflow in Beaver Creek, again, that's what I was talking about in the beginning, is that we have this ability to have surcharge capacity in the interceptor. However, our issues in Beaver Creek for compliance is limiting line under Beaver Creek. So when you go down past the landfill on Conway Road into Dairy Street, that's where the sewer goes underneath the creek, and it's really flat. So basically, Jeff has been telling me, he told me this 20 years ago, and it's still the case, is that flat sewer then bends. So we have sort of like a flow restriction there. So that is going to have to be evaluated at length by GHD as we get closer to this 2024. And then the excess flows at the lower end. Our staff found manholes that were old and leaking. They're about 25, 30 years old. And the creek, when it comes up, basically goes into the sewer. So that was a big find by our staff. GHD kept telling us, Bill, something doesn't make sense. You're showing these flows here, and they don't total at the end. So in between, there's something going wrong. And sure enough, our staff found these excess flows. So engineers are really picky about quantifying data, and they can't quantify this data. So Alton is saying, well, we got to identify these excess flows on the lower end. So in 2024, they're going to model this whole system after the BC7 project is over. Any questions on Beaver Creek? Spring Creek's a little easier because we started decades ago, and it's a very small area. Spring Creek 1 basin, the consent decree target is 6.5. Again, we modeled it, and SWAT-ERA agreed that we could surcharge and that we could have a capacity increase to 6.5. The target for the whole Spring Creek basin is 7.8, and that's a combination of 1 and 2. GHD pointed out a few years ago that we had a projected exceedance of the 7.8. We did some further metering, and ST2B was identified as the next project. So that project is underway, and Tim's going to give you an update on that project later and under his report. This program began in 13 was the second amendment. GHD did point out there's a correction on that slide. We actually started in 2006. In 2006, we started, and we completed 3 mini basins. So you saw we did 17 in Paxton, 9 in Beaver, 3 in Spring. And that was at a cost of $7.6 million, 713 privates. And then again, we just showed the map to show you the green and the red of what's remaining. So some of the lessons learned. We removed additional I&I that I mentioned earlier, the 75, 85%, we were getting 90, 95, 100. So that was big. We talked about the increased interceptor capacity. That could delay storage. And we could get storage paid for in the future from developers. And then the storage cost, I just mentioned that. And then the last thing is we need to also meet with CRW to evaluate the future capacity with EPA and DEP negotiated consent decrees, because we don't know what the final outcome of that's going to be. So we still have some things that we have to learn there. Beaver Creek, same thing. Iron removal was greater. We have the BC interceptor capacity that we talked about that we don't have in Paxton Creek. So we have that restriction underneath the creek. We have limitations in the joint interceptor. All that is different. So Beaver Creek is a little more complicated in solving the problem. It's not something that we don't think we're going to achieve with this program. The success we've had in Paxton, we believe we'll experience the same results in Beaver. However, it is more complicated. Stormwater program impacts. So the stormwater program, they have to pay their portion of the street paving, and that is 25%. So that really helps out the projected cost for sewer. And then what we also have impacts now, because we have 2 engineers, we have GHD and HRG, that we really need to change direction and have 1 engineer do the design for these contracts. And that doesn't stop GHD doing what they do with the whole program. They have their talents in sewer, HRG, and storm. This is just flat out engineering for design of sewer systems. So Tim is working on that. So moving ahead, the summary of the remaining cap costs. We just talked about the 2 remaining caps. That is $9.3 million, $5.1 million. So when you look at the total cap costs for Paxton Creek, spent to date $54.3 million. These 2 mini basins will add $14.5. So we're all done in Paxton Creek. We're going to spend $68.8 million. Jeff Wendell's original estimate 25 years ago was $75 million. So they were pretty close. Beaver Creek. So we just went over the projects that are remaining. So we have BC7, BC2. You can see those costs there. For each of those, they're inflated. So you have also the lining costs. So you can see 12.1, 1.2, and 14.9. So that's the remaining costs in Beaver. And then we have some remaining other cap efforts. So we have the metering chamber improvements. That gets flooded, and we need to raise it. Also, we have the force main replacement. That pump station was built in 1970, and it's the original force main. So if we don't replace it, we're asking for trouble. And then we have the placeholders we're talking about. So what I'm showing you here is not something that the board has approved, but we're projecting what we anticipate. So we'll be talking about this in 2024, but right now we anticipate placeholders for $12.3 million for BC or 10C. And then the next slide, you'll see we have one more placeholder, and that's the BC 8G, 8H, and Trunk H, and that's 14.89. So what we estimate for program cost total for Beaver Creek is what we've spent to date, $34.8 million. Remaining cost, $56.2. Total cost, $91.1 million.
91 and 68 so far.
Yes,
So we're talking about 160 million right now.
yes. So just more information on some other projects. So we have the 2021 lining project. Tim's going to go over that in Spring Creek. That's not part of the consent decree, but we wanted to show it because that was the project that Alton anticipated that we could have some issues in Spring Creek if not meeting our target flows if we don't do that. And then also we have a local issue in Spring Creek 1. We have a trunk line that has a capacity issue, so that cost is $849. So when you add all of those up for that, that's $10.5 million. So the total. Right now in your audit, you have debt of $116 million. That's a summary of all those costs I just went over for the 17 mini basins in Paxton, 19 in Beaver, and the 3 in Spring Creek. That's basically your $116 million. Now there's soft costs. You have HRG, you have GH, you have all these other costs, right? Staff. But basically, that's what you spent so far. When you look at all the other costs, the total estimated consent decree costs, when you add up what's remaining that I went over in the previous slides, the total program is going to be $170 million. You just did that number in your head already. I didn't really need this slide, did I, Dave?
I'm already on it, man.
All right.
I'm already on it.
So before you
You're
move on to the tables, that's our last slide on the tables. I didn't have a chance to add all the data, so it was fun crunching all these numbers. So I apologize I didn't get this in the slide today, but I have some other interesting details I just want to go over for private sewers and paving to give you a summary, and really the public that's watching too, on what this whole program encompasses for the whole township. So the total private sewers, like the house sewers in the township, is 15,894. The total replaced to date is 7,284. And the total, when we're done with all those programs I just showed you, will be 9,903. When you divide that by the total of 15,894, that shows that we're going to replace 57% of all the sewers in Lower Paxton. That does not include the BC placeholders because we're not sure if we're going to do those yet. Now, this is the interesting stat for paving. When you look at this issue that we've talked about for years, looking at, do you want to do sewer replacements or do you want to do storage? So paving, we have paved 42 miles of roads to date. 16 additional will be done. So that'll be a total of 58 miles that we will have paved, the sewer authority in Lower Paxton. So the total miles of township roads is 240. When you take 240 and you divide that with the 58 miles that we've done, you're looking at, we've replaced 25% of the township streets, the sewer authority. So that's a huge benefit to the township, which I'm going to explain here with the money side of this. So all that results in $35 million that the authority has invested in the township streets. That results in $2 million a year. And when you look at what we're spending compared to the township, they use liquid fuels money, and they're spending about $570,000 to $700,000 a year, and we're spending $2 million. So this is all this data that I just updated that George and I presented to the supervisors that they requested back in 2018 when Mr. Henry asked, how many roads do we need to pave a year? And that was around 10. So by the sewer authority doing this total sewer replacement program, That allows the township to be able to achieve the road paving miles that they need every year. So I apologize, I didn't have time to get those slides, and I was just crunching more numbers today and didn't get a chance to update it. So lastly, Alton was good enough gracious enough to get these done in a very quick time. So basically, this first one is our current cap that shows storage. So basically, you've seen this before. So this shows no rate increase next year, and then the board likes to have 3 to 4% increases each year. So this just shows what you're always interested in, the total reserve that achieves that, and that cost is $67 million. The next slide is we just talked about these sewer replacements. Looks better. You only have a $2 rate increase in 2023 and a $4 in 2024, and that total cost is only $55 million. So you're going to save $12 million. Initially, we sent a plan to DEP that would save money with storage, but that was at lower anticipated removal rates. So now we're getting these higher removal rates, and we have this additional capacity in all these basins. That really helps look at doing sewer replacements down the road, and we're getting better meter data. So I think, Alton, you wanted to say a few words about the program in itself. They've been working on this with us for like 20 years, and I wanted just him finish up the presentation. He wanted to make a few comments. Go ahead.
Evening, everyone. I just wanted to reiterate, and we talk about this pretty often, but the question came up, originally, what our system looked like back when we first started. And, back in, I think it was 1999, when GHD first started getting involved, there was about 44 overflow locations between manholes that overflowed or overflows into basements that were occurring with, anywhere from 2 or more inches of rain. And the system was really bad. I mean, it was, like I said, very little rain would all of a sudden cause the thing to surcharge beyond capacity that it would overflow. What staff has achieved to date is pretty amazing, and actually it's quite a talk when we're at these conferences and things like that. There's no other municipality that I know that is achieving these results that Lower Paxton is achieving. You guys are getting. Currently, you're getting, like 90, 85, 95, 100% removal of I&I with these programs. You're doing projects that include laterals to the houses, so the homeowner's getting an extra benefit in that you're addressing issues that would be down the road from these laterals, plus what you're dealing with now. So it's quite a monumental project. It's been a lot of work, and I really got to point out how much staff has really achieved. If we look back, I believe when we first did the first projection, we were projecting, from the very beginning, like $8 increases every quarter. I think we were in the very first one, and we were actually showing shortly after that it was probably going to be higher. They were probably going to be like $12 a quarter. And you've actually been able to, with how the program's developed, you're able to monitor how you're doing this along the way, make improvements, and there's been a lot of improvements for how this is done, and saving costs. So, what Bill just showed here with the rates, you're really well ahead of where you plan to be in terms of schedule, but way ahead of where you plan to be in terms of rates as well. We've held rates at 0 for a couple years now. Prior to that, we were only at like the $6 range, I believe, for a couple years. So I just wanted to point out how successful this has been with the staff and what they've managed to achieve. I don't know if there's anything else I have. I think looking forward, what I would point out is the two things Bill mentioned is growth. It's nice that you can now look at what you're doing in the future. You're already looking beyond the cap. So you're just tapering that to match the growth, and a lot of that can be paid for with the development itself. The other thing I would point out, though, is, Bill even sent me an article the other day. We are getting more and more of these wet weather events. So there is a change in what we've experienced. When we first started this, we'd be lucky if we had 3 wet weather events a year, so we were really chasing data. We're getting, I think this last engineer report, what was there, Melissa, 8 events from the last quarter, something like that. So we're getting a lot more rain in Pennsylvania, and you're well positioned to be able to handle that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I got to say too that I've been on this board for quite some time, and it is pretty amazing from what I remember at the very start to where we're at today.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember having meetings where we were where you had a map up, Auden, and this map had like all these red dots all over the place, and it was all these manholes that were
Yes.
overflowing, and trying to address what we were going to do there. What was some of the short-term remedies while we were trying to address long-term solutions with the replacement? It is kind of amazing 20 years later.
The worst part was when I started here in '96, we had 150 basement backups during really bad storms, and we don't have any anymore.
Yeah.
So that's the big impact that the public
Yep.
sees.
A couple of quick questions.
Yeah, go right.
Just because those stats, I mean, they were really interesting. And I think we got to do a better job as a township telling this story.
Right.
It's a massive undertaking, and really all people know is what their sewer rate is and that it goes up, on a semi-regular basis. And and there's a lot of construction where they can't get out of their neighborhood. So I mean, they don't really know the whole story, and it's a great story, and I'm hoping we can do a better job telling it. But these numbers are just amazing. Can you tell me again, what was the projected rate increases you guys thought? Was that at the beginning of, when was that? And it was $8 increases per quarter or per year?
So, yeah, $8 per year.
Or is it a year or a quarter?
I think it was per quarter.
No.
Oh, yeah,
initially-
quarterly rate every year, though.
Yeah, when we were at the
yes.
very start.
Yes.
$8 per quarter every year.
Yes.
And where did we end up averaging?
So now you can see on the rate table that we're at, no rate increase for 3 years in a row. And then with the placeholders, if that works, we're going to be at $2 in 2023, $4 in 2024, and $6 in 2025. So that's a major impact to the customers, of course, is not having rate increases for 4 years in a row. And we're always looking at the data, so there's a potential that we will need rate increases in 2023. It changes every year when you crunch the numbers. But
That's all we go by is
Yes.
the numbers. And real quick, you said 57% of all sewers will have been replaced,
yes,
and that is
in the whole township.
in the whole township
Yep.
under the consent decree?
Yes.
Or the,
Yes, yep.
Okay. And 42 miles to date of roads
Correct.
repaved due to sewer projects, and about 58 miles expected to go.
16 left.
16 left,
That'll-
so a
58.
total of
58.
58.
Yes.
Township has 240 total. 25% of
Yes.
the road repaving has been due to sewer projects, and 35.
So if we can equate that into costs for the township residents in terms of taxes that
Right.
they've saved that would be needed to increase taxes to pave roads.
Right, and
So
this is
there's a double savings here, yeah.
it's taxes and the roads. People don't really expect a heck of a lot. They're really understanding when it comes to township. It's roads, basic services, trash. So when you can point to roads,
Yep.
I think that's a real benefit. So just wanted to double check my numbers here. Thank you for the presentation, and
Yes.
thanks for
my
everything you
pleasure.
guys do.
All right, any further questions on that
Steve, would-
tremendously
do we need a
detailed
motion?
presentation?
For those tables, you think, or is it on the record, or should we have a motion to submit the tables to DEP? We don't do that very often.
I think you probably should. It's been a long time since we've done that,
Right.
but I think we usually get some kind of a motion from the board to submit them.
So, Mr. Chairman and members, we're asking the board make a motion to authorize GHD to submit the revised cap tables for Beaver Creek and Paxton Creek as presented.
Anybody like to make a motion to submit the revised cap tables for Beaver Creek and Paxton Creek as presented?
So moved, Jewel.
So moved by Miss Lindsay. Is there a
I'm not going to
second?
repeat it, so.
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Navarro. Any further comments by anybody? I think we do this by voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? So carried.
Thank you.
Thank you to yourself, GHD. Thank you very much. Very well done. All right, Melissa, I think you're up to talk about dedication of developer-installed sewers. You were out in the parking lot. You were preparing your presentation. I saw you earlier. You were ready.
I'm ready. It's a very small one, so it didn't take me very long to get ready. I've got tonight for the board's consideration, the two developer phases, it's Stray Winds Farms Phase 6 and Shade Brook Phase 4. Both of those phases of the developments have been completed. All the punch list items and everything have been addressed, so the sewers are good to go. I have the dedication paperwork from the developers in the packet for you. It's already been signed by the developers. So all we need to do now is get Steve to record them after we get an approval from the board to do so.
Okay. Any further discussion on this? Is there a motion on the floor to approve the dedication of developer-installed sewers? Anybody want to jump up on this one?
Mr. Chairman, I.
Excuse me,
I
Mr.
move
Blaine,
that we
remember I
approve-
asked.
Yeah, that's right. Ms. Lindsay has asked that we approve each individually, okay? So if we could do that, Mr. Zumas, I think you're up. So we wanted to just approve Stray Winds Farm Phase 6 first, and then Shade Brook Phase 4 second,
Correct.
okay?
Move that we approve Stray Winds Farm Phase 6
As presented.
as presented.
Is there a second? Second by Mr. Navarro. Any further discussion? I think we can do this by voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Mr. Zumas, you want to jump on
Yes.
Shade Brook Phase 4?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve dedication for Shade Brook Phase 4 as
Okay,
presented.
thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Ramsey. Mr. Ramsey jumping in there. All right, is there any further discussion? Hearing none, let's do this by voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So
Ab-
carried.
Abstaining.
Ms. Lindsay, please note that Ms. Lindsay abstained from the vote on the Shade Brook Phase 4 vote. Okay, anything else? I think we just covered the dedication of developer installed sewers.
Thank you.
Next item's mine too.
You're on the next one, too. Resolution 2108, adopting construction specifications for pipe busting.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, before Melissa presents the specs, just want to make a few introductory comments. So this addendum was requested by staff to GHD to prepare because we've never really had contractors come out to the extent that they had and do private sewer pipe bursting and lining. So it would be occasional and as approved by the engineer. And we're also having other issues with certain contractors. So for that reason, we recommended the engineer prepare these for the board's consideration tonight. Now I'll turn it over to Melissa.
All right. As Bill had mentioned, the standard specs are normally for developers who are installing new sanitary sewers or for homeowners that are installing a new building sewer and service lateral to serve their house. Now, occasionally, like Bill said, you will get some contractors that come in that either, they need to have their service lines replaced due to roof age or some other situation. And most of the time, in the past, that had been done through dig and replace. A lot of the plumbers that are coming out now, since some of these technologies are getting a little bit cheaper and easier for them to do, they're doing pipe bursting of the laterals and building sewers, or they're suggesting lining. And that way, the homeowners don't have to have their yards dug up. I'm not exactly sure the cost savings on that kind of scale, but I'm sure some of the homeowners find it attractive by not having to have their yard dug. So the township's been having a few of these come in where they end up doing the pipe bursting, and the specs were to cover pretty much new sewer lines. So we didn't have anything in writing to hand over to the contractors to say, hey, this is how we want you to do these two different items, and just to have some teeth to back up like how they want things done, how the township would like things done, so that everything's airtight and you're not causing problems for things you're replacing now. So we wanted to get these specs added to the standard specs, so that's what we're proposing to do here, is just add these two sections to do the pipe bursting and the lining of the service lines and things to the standard specifications. And as part of the addendum here too, we had talked over with staff, just having a completion certificate too. That's part of the packet, if you'd flip through, that needs to be filled out by these contractors, because I guess there's been a little bit of an issue with getting some inspection and things done on these things, which obviously is harder to do like after the fact, because there's you can't see it. So we're trying to make this as friendly to township staff as possible.
Right. Okay. Any further questions?
Yes, I do have one.
Yep.
I noticed in the specs that the resident is required to apply for the permit. What's the point of that?
Yeah, I can comment on that. That's really the necessitation for these specs. We have a contractor that basically has had some practices that are sort of scrupulous, and we've met with Steve, and we actually met with the police department, and I don't want to go into anything further on that. But the reason is we've gone out and found sewers that we've replaced that contractors are proposing to the residents to have redone. And this has been half a dozen of these cases.
Is this the same contractor by chance?
It is. So when Steve and I looked at it, building department goes through this a lot more than sewer. You have to go back to the UCC code and what the ramifications legally you have there, and in effect it goes back to the property owner because they're the permittee, right? So we thought that the best way to stop this problem is, hey, the resident has to come in, and then we can meet with them and explain all these things to them, and then if they do proceed and it's a legit replacement, then now they're going to get a certificate from the contractor that, okay, that certificate, we're going to tell them, look, don't pay the contractor until you get this certificate. So this is really the only option that we can think of. I know it's really out of the ordinary, and it's going to confuse a lot of people, but it's the only way legally that we came up with that you can stop this problem.
Okay, so you're looking out for the customer's best
Yes.
interest.
Yeah, but we don't want to be a pain in the ass, but that's the only way to stop it.
Okay, I saw that, and I had never seen that before, but
Yep.
Good
It's
reason.
not typical. You're absolutely right.
Good reason, though.
Yep.
And so I guess a lot of this, what we're doing is not necessarily because contractors are doing it mechanically improperly or things, something like that. It's that this other thing that you talked about. It's more the homeowner doesn't know exactly what they're doing, and or are there actually
There's
incidents of
issues.
them not doing it?
Yes, they're not doing it correctly. They're not calling for inspections.
And that brings up something I should probably note here for board members and people who see this on the agenda or watching TV and see pipe bursting. They're not going to know what the heck we're talking about. And I had to run on YouTube. And when you see pipe bursting, you're going to YouTube. And it's really incredible.
Yeah.
It's really incredible. Anybody, looking at the agenda and saying it won't take too long to find it. And real quickly, a contractor, instead of digging up the whole lawn, you run a machine apparatus through the old pipe, which has to be, I guess, old enough. It can't be PCV or plastic. It has to be all the other kinds. Something that you can break up. They can run a machine through to literally bust it, and right behind it, they're running through the new piping.
That's
So
right.
no digging, very little digging, and you simply run a machine through to just bust, and I guess the materials stay underground. You don't dig them up. So you run that through, smash the old pipe that's in there, pulling through the new pipe as you move along. So I think for board members and anybody seeing this on the agenda, it's important that we just explain what it is.
Good.
And the benefits are, I guess, it could be less costly, and we, as an authority, have to get this in, get some standards.
Yes.
Get it in writing,
Absolutely.
and it's a good thing.
Phil, who makes that choice to do that? Are
The
town?
choice to
do the-
replace, that's a
yeah.
private sewer, so the homeowner makes the
Okay.
choice, right? So that's why we want them to come in to get the permit.
Okay.
So they understand all the standards that are required.
So when you're out replacing them, they don't get that choice from the beginning. This is if they have to have it replaced after it's already been replaced.
So going back to the presentation, the circle's getting smaller. 57% of all private sewers are going to be replaced,
Right,
right?
right.
So when this occurs, it's going to be very rare. One of the issues we're having that I didn't want to get into a whole lot tonight is certain contractors trying to replace sewers that we just replaced a couple years ago. So we're going to deal with that issue. But so there's two issues going parallel here. We have to have a standard. So when people do it legit, that the standard is there. We didn't have that before.
Right.
And we have to address this other issue to stop this contractor who just can come in and get a permit and do the work, and the poor homeowner doesn't know what they're really getting into. So it really, there's two parallel issues we're achieving with one document.
Okay.
And
Yep.
one thing I'd like to mention too, along that lines of trying to protect the homeowner too, trenchless technology isn't for every single case. Like if there's a bad sag in the line, the trenchless is, like you said, you pull the line through, it's going to follow those sags and things. So part of the document too has the requirement that the line be televised and then shown to township staff so that they know, because the township staff will know once they see it if it's something that can be lined or can be trenchlessly repaired, or if it should be dug up. So that's an extra layer of protection to the homeowner, because the homeowner's not going to know as well as the staff here will. So that's an extra layer that they're doing the right repair for the
So
situation.
it sounds to me that this contractor that is doing this, it's not exactly illegal what they're doing. It's just unethical what they're doing, because they're probably going in and they probably know that the lateral or the sewer line doesn't need to be replaced, but they probably have.
I don't want to get into the illegal discussion because we're
Right.
going to have that.
Okay.
But, if it's what they're representing, it could, are we allowed to talk about this, Steve? Yeah,
It's public.
There could be
it's a
some,
public meeting.
they
So,
they
yeah.
could be falsifying information
Okay.
to the resident to entice them to replace their sewer. They actually have a YouTube on it, Chris, if you want to watch it, but I'll explain later. It's a business plan.
Yeah, I know what contractor you're talking about.
Yes, it could be something legally that could come out of this, but I
Okay.
can't say. Yeah.
Okay.
So Bill, let me ask you this. Are people having trouble and they're calling this contractor, or is this?
Yes, but it's
Okay.
not the sewer that we just replaced because
Right.
that's brand new.
Okay.
They just need to have their inside line cleaned out.
Okay.
Yeah, just have like a blockage or a slow
So they
moving
call
toilet.
this contractor and comes
Yeah,
out
this
and says.
contractor.
You got to
is-
replace your sewer line
Yeah, this
in a hurry
contract-
too. Yeah, same day. Yeah.
Yeah, this contractor's saying we can come out and clean out your line for X dollars, but they're coming out there and then their person is saying, well, you need to replace this or you need to do this. and
Right,
that
right.
person's buying
Yep.
10 times more than what they were being.
Are they calling the township and asking questions before they,
That's why, no, and that's
They're
why
not.
we're
Okay.
requiring, as Mr. Ramsey pointed out, which is
Right.
very unusual,
Mhm.
requiring the property owner to get the permit.
Right.
Yep.
But just to be clear too, the technology is good.
Yeah, the technology is good.
So
Just-
other
just
people will
not-
come in and want to do this in the
Yeah.
future too.
All right,
so
well,
it's
we'll
good
talk
to
about
have
this
it.
more,
Yes.
about how we want to
Yep.
handle this with this contractor.
Yep.
And unfortunately, folks probably will never know unless we tell them somehow why we're making them come in personally, the property owners, unless you
Yeah.
let them know when they come in.
We will do that. We'll
Yeah.
let them know when they come in that we wanted to make
Why?
sure that you're not wasting
Yeah.
your money on your sewer line. Yep.
Yeah, it's the right thing.
Yep.
Okay, sounds good. Any further questions? Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 2108, adopting construction specifications for pipe bursting, not busting, in
Ah.
private sewer lining?
Go ahead. I was going to move for that.
Mr. Judd makes a motion. Is there
Yeah.
a second?
Now, is it busting or bursting? It's busting.
Bursting.
Huh?
Bursting.
Oh, okay. It
Bursting.
says-
Remember, you looked it up.
It says busting on the written, but we're saying bursting.
Mr. Judd makes a motion. Mr. Oakes has a second on the floor. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I think we can do this by voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Resolution 2109, 10 and 11, authorizing condemnation of sanitary sewer easements for the Red Top Road and McIntosh Road sewer relocation projects. Mr. Weaver.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, again, you've seen these resolutions on numerous occasions for our consent decree sewer replacement projects. This is a little different. This is the township and county bundling bridge program. So Red Top and McIntosh are part of that bundling program, and those bridges are scheduled to be replaced. McIntosh is actually under bid right now, and they're opening bids, I believe, tomorrow. But as part of that bridge replacement, the sewer runs right through the bridge. So we need to relocate those sewer lines. And in order to do that, we need to get easements. So what you have for you tonight are 2 easements on Red Top and 1 on McIntosh. I'll be
Okay.
happy to answer any questions.
He's pretty straightforward. Any further questions for Mr. Weaver? Is there a motion on the floor to approve resolutions 9, 10, and 11?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve Resolution 2109, 2110, and 2111, authorizing condemnation of sanitary sewer easements for the Red Top Road and McIntosh Road sewer project as presented by Mr. Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Zumas. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Ms. Lindsay. Any further discussion? Let's do this by voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Township reports. Update on BC2, ABC, and 5B project. An update on the SC2B and BC2AB with a question mark C, 5B lining project. I&I crew private sewer replacement update and BC7 project. And quarterly financial statements. Wow, that's a lot. That's exciting.
Yeah.
Anybody want to jump in on and talk about this stuff?
I'll start off. Chairman, members of the board, the first thing I have for you
Tim, why don't
tonight,
why don't you come up here and get some TV time?
I could. I have to bring my computer.
Oh, he's on, oh, she said he's on.
Okay, all right, okay. You stay right there, my man, then. All right.
Yeah.
Trying to help you out.
Makes it a little easier. I can
Okay,
point to
all
the
right.
screen from here. Mr. Chairman, if you can go ahead and open up the
You know what? That's the financial. Go back, Dave. I think
Roger that.
it's missing.
Yeah, I don't think you have it on here.
Oh,
How
that's
about
it
right there?
yeah.
Right, just try this one here. Okay, there we go.
yeah, if you can go ahead and open up the C map portion. I'll go over Eastern Lincolnstown first. If you're following along at home, these maps that we're looking at, you can access these at www.lowerpaxtonnetwork.com. Just as a refresher, the center lines that are green are the areas where all work is completed at this point. The center lines that are yellow is where the pipe work is complete and the paving work remains at this point. Red center lines are current work areas, and purple is upcoming work areas.
Okay.
So you can see that Dolly right now is working on Blue Ridge Avenue between Blue Bell and Balthaser. They're replacing building sewers. At this point, probably by the end of this week, they'll have all of the building sewers on Blue Ridge Avenue replaced. And the only dig work remaining on Blue Ridge will be 2 manhole-to-manhole sections that need to be replaced. The paving crew returned to town. They're up here in this Jerome, Judy, Sunny area. This week they're working on driveway paving, so restoring all the driveways that were disturbed as part of the work. It was completed last fall and last winter. And probably at some point next week, they'll start the street paving in this area. The plan that we have at this point from Dolly, the progression, is going to move from, when they're done in that area, they're going to move over kind of where you're at here, Rockford Heights. As you can see, all the pipe work is done there, but they need to pave all those streets. When they finish in there, which will take a number of weeks, then they'll move over to Inglewood Heights. Basically in a progression that they replace the sewers, starting up in that Jerome, Judy, Rockford Heights, Inglewood Heights. Another thing to point out here is the work that was completed on the Beaver Creek Interceptor. On this project, the Beaver Creek Interceptor starts down in the green section here, kind of off the screen, runs along the right-of-way, crosses underneath Blue Ridge, Wenrick, up through Locust Street, and makes a turn on Balthaser, stops just short of Linglestown Road. At this point, Dolly is kind of right at this point where the purple meets the green. And just wanted to point out, based on the groundwater conditions that we're seeing during Dolly's construction, we're expecting a really good reduction in excess flows just based on this pipeline that's running through, crossing creeks and running under wetland areas. And as far as schedule, the last thing I have for you here on Eastern Linglestown, Dolly has accelerated their work quite a bit. They brought additional crews to the project, and we've tasked them with kind of looking at what is left. I mean, you can see on this map, this yellow portion is remaining at this point. So we should have a schedule from Dolly to finish this entire project that we can share with the board in the coming weeks.
Okay.
That's all I have for BC2, BC5, if there's...
I just want to make one comment in addition, since Mr. Judd was gracious to say that the stats are good. So this project that Tim just showed you, it's about 5.5 miles of roads that we're going to pave. So that's part of that total, right? So that's a good bit of miles up there. How many driveways, Tim, do you think they're going to pave?
Just in that Jerome, Judy area, there's about 30. So, I mean, there's quite a few in Rockford and Inglewood as well.
And you're replacing the whole driveway?
We don't have a real good policy on that.
You had to go there, didn't you?
We have to make judgment calls. I mean, there's situations where you're cutting through the edge of the driveway.
Right.
Obviously, we don't want to replace the whole
Right.
thing for something like that. But a lot of situations, if we're going right up through the middle, we really don't have a choice. And we do try to, as part of design, we do try to relocate the laterals. You can't always do that, but where it's coming out of the house and where it's connecting in at the street, if you can change where that location is, then you can save some money on the paving portion.
So we never asked the board to create a policy because it would be so complex, because as Tim just described, there's so many different scenarios you could have with the sewer crossing it, parallel, whatever. So The costs have been controllable. If the costs get out of control, then we will ask for a policy decision from the board. So right now, the engineer decides with the contractor what's going to be done. In some cases, we replace the whole thing, and if it just ran right up the corner, then we just patch it. So
Which would make sense.
it does, and then if there's dicey situations, we've remedied it, and a lot of people are okay with it, where instead of replacing the whole thing, we'll replace half of it and then seal the rest of it, and seal it all together.
So now, are most of them asphalt or are some of them cement? Because concrete is very expensive.
Yeah, on this Eastern Linglestown project, the majority are asphalt.
Oh, okay.
Now we do have a neighborhood coming up in BC 7 where basically the whole neighborhood is concrete driveways. So that was an area that we spent a lot of time investigating
Right.
where that, that connection is made and seeing if we could move
Because that's very
laterals.
expensive, yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Any other questions on BC 2?
Okay.
The other report I have for you is on the 2020-2021 lining project. And you'll remember this is our trenchless lining project. The general contractor is Granite Inliner, LLC. Granite's working with two subcontractors. Musson Brothers from Wisconsin is lining laterals for them. And Mara Services from Ohio is lining the manholes. And just a bit of good news to share with the board tonight. As of today, we had 18 mainline runs that have been completed, lined, air tested, televised, and the result of the air test was that all 18 of those lines have passed with 0 drop. So you'll remember some of the problems, you may remember some of the problems we had the last time we tried out lining with some of the tolerances on the air test and the issues we saw with the product being able to meet those requirements. So thus far, it's going well. We're not having those issues with Granite, and we're happy with the product and hoping that it continues. Obviously, it's a large project, and we're dealing with not just Granite. We have the two subcontractors as well. So we'll have more information on this project as we go, but just wanted to provide the good news to you here tonight.
If there's no more questions, I'll turn it to Jim, and he has a brief report on the I-9 crew that's working in the BC 7.
Yeah, good evening, board members. Yeah, our I&I crew is in the BC 7 area. This is the part that is all PVC main line, and our crew will either go in and replace from the house to the street edge with new pipe, or we'll air test the existing PVC. So there's currently 177 properties in that area, and to date, our crew has replaced and completed 77 of these total properties. And of the 77 properties, 67 of those are completed now with all of their restoration, which includes lawn and concrete. This is the area that's over in the Meadowbrook area, Tyler Drive, Oak Avenue, that area there that's still being designed, the final design for the BC 7 project, which will be put out hopefully in September, they say. So that's about it for that area there, if anybody else has any questions.
And then lastly, board members, as I reported at the end of last year, we do have our own sewer stormwater accountant. And our accountant will be giving the board a quarterly financial statements. I don't think it's necessary for her to attend the meetings. I can certainly answer any questions you have. But essentially, this is a representation of all the cash that we have at our bank, and then also all of our bond funds at Pliget used for the capital program.
Okay.
So when necessary, if there's anything of significance,
I will certainly point it out to the board, but you have the statements in your packet. I'll be happy to answer any questions on the quarterly financial statements.
It's good that we, we now have quarterly financial statements that are being presented by the accountant. That's being reviewed, signed off. I think that meets the requirements of the auditors and their management letter comments, correct? So
This
I
is
think
the
we're in pretty
that's
good
the
shape.
first quarterly financial statement that
It's one in
has been
20
done
years
that
that
way.
I've been on this board. It's the first one I've ever seen.
Yeah, right. Well, it took us a while.
Well, it's about time, Bill.
Thanks.
All right. I don't think we have to approve anything, right? We're
No,
good to go.
there's no approvals necessary.
Final item is the engineer's report. Lawton, keep it simple. Oh, Melissa, you're gonna do it.
I've got most of it, and if we need out, we'll call them up here.
I was gonna say that it looks like we covered a lot of this. Here's BC 2A 5, 7, C, D. We covered a lot of that. The lining, the Nyes Road, Devonshire Heights intersection safety. I mean, is anything specific you want to cover here? Because I think we covered most of this.
You've covered most of everything on here. I think the only thing that wasn't touched on is the maintenance and emergency contract. We're working on some work orders for those, just things that pop up from time to time.
Okay.
But other than that,
Bridge replacement. We talked about that.
talked about that.
We've got the developer reviews. Okay. Any questions for staff, GHD, on regards to the engineer's report? All right, Melissa, quality effort. Way to knock that out. Way to go. All right. Okay. So we are now ready to adjourn the meeting, I believe. Is there any other further comments by board members? Mr. Judd feverishly taking notes over there. I think he's going to be writing an article for the newsletter. His investigative skills as a former
reporter.
TV analyst. He will
Former
be-
reporter used to cover meetings just like this. I just
Yeah.
can't help it.
He's all over it, so we're looking good. GHD, solid effort. Jim, great job. Can't say enough. You're awesome. Lower Paxton's finest. Well done. Way to protect us in here. All right. Hearing nothing else, we'll just state that the next meeting is right now tentatively scheduled to be Tuesday, May 25th, 2021. If there's enough items on the agenda to discuss, could be canceled, and then we would go to June. Okay. That's it. Hearing anything else? Motion to adjourn?
So moved. All right.
Thank you.
Bill, Ed Norton be proud of you.